Welcome to Now More Than Ever, Israel Needs Us. My name is Dick Trudell. I'm here from Building Bridges. That's a group of local Jews and Christians who are working together to enrich the connection that exists now between the Christian and Jewish communities in our area. Another function is we support and defend the state of Israel. Well, it is my pleasure to introduce Rabbi YY Jacobson. Rabbi Jacobson is considered one of the most inspiring Jewish speakers in the world today. He is editor-in-chief of the largest Yiddish-English weekly, the Allgemeiner Journal, and is a teacher and mentor to thousands of people over the world. Rabbi's weekly internet essays on Judaism are read by tens of thousands of people throughout the world. Rabbi Jacobson is the first rabbi invited by the Pentagon to present the annual religious keynote address to 4,000 U.S. military chaplains and to 34,000 members of the National Security Agency. As you will find out, Rabbi is a gifted orator. He brings enduring truth to all he will tell us, and he does it in a manner that is both fascinating and entertaining. He serves as the spiritual leader of a congregation by Shemal in New York and is dean of the Yeshiva Net. Rabbi is the author of the acclaimed tape series, A Tale of Two Souls. Please join me in welcoming Rabbi YY Jacobson.
Thank you so much. I'm a very lucky man. Not everybody gets to hear their eulogy during their own lifetime. You know, they tell the story about a Frenchman, an Italian fellow, and a Jew who died and arrived to heaven. And the angel greets them and says, first to the Frenchman, "Here, come in. Let me show you your place in paradise." The Frenchman walks in and he sees a hall filled with the most delicious, exquisite French foods, the most tasty of wines. He, as a wine connoisseur, can truly appreciate it. Unbelievable amount and quality of wine. He turns to the angel and he says, "I think there's some mistake. I've been a pretty big sinner. Are you sure this is meant for me?" And the angel says, "It's meant for you, but there's a catch. The catch is every afternoon, 5:00 p.m., we bring out a huge, big, hot bowl of soup. And you must go in to this pot of hot soup. Immerse yourself completely. And then the paradise is yours to enjoy." Frenchman says, "No way. I'm afraid of the pain." Okay. The Italian comes in. The angel shows him his paradise. The most amazing pastas. "Again, you're sure it's meant for me? I have been a sinner." "It's for you, but there's a catch, 5:00. Huge pot of hot soup comes out. You gotta go in." No way. I'm scared." "Okay, bye. Go to hell." Jew comes in. He looks at the paradise. Psst, gefilte fish, kugel, kishka, knedlach, kreplach, cookies, cake, cholesterol, kasha vanishkas, all the best Jewish foods in the world, and of course the most favorite Jewish foods, Chinese food, and even more Jewish sushi, and the food that all Jews really love with the depth of their hearts, quinoa, soybeans, and barley kernels. The Jew says, "You sure it's meant for me? I've been a sinner. I never attended synagogue. I never did any mitzvot." The angel says there's a catch. 5:00 p.m. sharp. Big pot of hot soup comes out. You gotta go in. If you agree, paradise is yours to enjoy. The Jew says, agreed. Great. Mazel tov. Welcome to paradise. His French and Italian buddies turn to him and they say, "We know you're scared of pain. You're more afraid of pain. You're a greater chicken than us. Why were you not afraid of going in 5:00 to that big hot pot of soup?" He says, "It's very simple. I have been at countless Jewish events, countless Jewish dinners. 5:00 is not 5:00, and the soup is never that hot. Which is how I know, and I'm so happy to be attending a half not Jewish event. So that 7:30 was 7:30, rather than 7:30 being 9:00. And the tomato soup was hot." Ahmadinejad, the other day, decided to take a plane ride over the skies of Tehran, a nearby territory. His private pilot is driving the plane, and an engine fails. He gets on the system, calls out to the airports in the region, and he says, "Help! I have here the leader of Iran, and an engine failed. What does one do? Any country in the area give me help besides Israel. We don't want help from Israel." No one responds. 10 minutes later, a second engine fails. Desperately, he gets onto the system. "I desperately need your help. A second engine failed. Everybody respond besides Israel." Shh, no response. 10 minutes later, a third engine fails. Now he's frantic. He says, "If the last fourth engine fails, I'm going down with Ahmadinejad. Anybody respond, even Israel." And the one monitoring the system in Ben Gurion Airport in Tel Aviv gets onto the system and says, "Yes, Po medaber David mit Tel Aviv. This is David from Tel Aviv. How can I help you?" He says, "I have the leader of Iran. 3 engines failed. I really need your help." And the Israeli says, "Sure." And the Iranian pilot says, "Wow, what a gentleman you are. How special you are. You will really help us and guide us." He says, "Absolutely, yes." "What do I do?" The Israeli tells him, "Say after me, word for word." "Sure, what should I say?" "Yisgadal v'yiskadash shmei Rabbah," which is the Jewish prayer for the dead. Now, some of you have to explain the joke to the people. Tonight, as many of us recall Veterans Day, we remember, as you said, those who sacrificed a lot for our country. First World War, Second World War, and many other events in which our courageous men and women of service dedicated their hearts and souls for the United States of America. It reminds me of the history teacher who stands up to his classroom. Says, "My dear students, can anyone share with me the author and the date of the following declaration? Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country." Who said it and when? The students shrugged their shoulders in ignorance. They didn't know. Only one boy knew, and this was a Japanese kid who came to study in the States from Tokyo. And he immediately said it was John Fitzgerald Kennedy, January 22nd, 1961, during his inauguration address. It was raining that day in D.C., and that's when Kennedy said, "Ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country." It happens to be, parenthetically, his speechwriter died last week. Yizgadal, Yizgadash. The teacher was very impressed with the Japanese boy and annoyed with the American kids. "You spoiled American brats addicted to your iPhones, Blackberries, blueberries, raspberries, schmazberries, boyfriends, girlfriends, laptops, cars. You know nothing of the great ideas and ideals that inspired our country and its celebrated leaders. We have to learn from the Japanese. Here is a boy who comes from a foreign culture but displays perseverance, commitment. He knows what John Kennedy said and when he said it, January 61, and the teacher goes on for 20 minutes to extol the virtues of the Japanese until there is a voice heard from the back of the classroom, and you'll forgive me, folks, one of the students screams, "The hell with the Japanese!" The teacher was dumbfounded. 21 years in a classroom, nobody ever spoke to him such words. He thunders out loud, "Who said that?" And the student responds quietly, "Harry Truman, 1945. And so tonight and today, as we pay tribute and honor on Veterans Day to those who asked not what the country can do for them, but asked what they can do for the country, it is profoundly appropriate that people of goodwill in the Jewish and in the Christian community here in Burlington unite to continue asking the same question. What can we do? What is our calling? What ought we do to stand up for peace, true peace, that is, justice, morality, and the supreme value, the sanctity of life. Amen. You know, thank you. The other day in Starbucks, you're laughing already? Starbucks that funny? A rabbi, a priest, and a minister went in to have a latte for $9.75. In my house, a latte is for free. Starbucks, $9.75. What are they going to talk about? They didn't want to talk about the passion. It's a little divisive. So they decided to talk about a very common theme that everyone can agree on. Namely, what would you like to hear people say at your funeral? Isn't that an inspiring theme? The priest says, I would like to hear people say, you know, he was a true man of the Lord. He brought in the light of the Lord into countless hearts, offered them salvation. The minister says, I would like to hear people say at my funeral, he was a real friend. You can lean on him in times of distress. You can trust him in times of anxiety. Rabbi, what about you? And the rabbi says, I would like to hear somebody say at my funeral, you know, I think he's moving. My friends, my dear brothers and sisters, I don't know if you see it on my face, but I'm a Jew. I know I don't look it, but my mother happens to be Jewish, and she married a Jew too. And miracle of miracles, she gave birth to 5 Jewish children, and I'm the baby, as you can see. And so, I come from a people that's been around for many, many years. We've been around the block. They once asked a Chinese politician, "What is your opinion about the French and American Revolution?" He said, "Too early to tell." What's 260 years, the scheme of history, right? In fact, the Jews and the Chinese have an old argument. Who comes first? The Chinese say, "We come first." The Jews say, "No, we have been around 1,000 years before you." And I once heard a Chinaman turn to a rabbi and said, "So what did you eat the first 1,000 years?" So the rabbi said, "We fasted." It was Yom Kippur. So he said, "You're not Jewish if you fasted. 1,000 years you fasted." He said, "Of course, and we're compensating for those 1,000 years." And so, I come from a people that cherishes life, believes in the sanctity of life, believes in the value of life. I used to wonder what was the depth of Moses' words at the end of Deuteronomy. "See, there are 2 paths before you. Path of life, the path of death, of b'charta b'chaim. You should choose life." Wow, genius. You really need Moses to tell us choose life? But in 2010, I know the answer. Because when I look around and I see cultures and religions that teach their students and children to choose death, and teach them that the greatest achievement they can experience in their life is to die, and in the process, murder others. And for that, they will receive 72 pies of pizza. Or whatever they call it. Just give me the Jewish version. In heaven. If there was ever a culture of people who could have developed such an ethic easily, it was the Jewish people. Who have been hunted down, persecuted, massacred, generation after generation, almost every country they ended up in. They could have easily developed a culture which would sanctify and celebrate death. But we clung tenaciously to Moses' words, "Ubacharta b'chaim." You shall choose life. Love life. Give life. Fight for life. Celebrate life. And that's our continuous commitment to life. Sometimes people who scream, "Peace, peace, peace," I say, of course, peace. But in my book, the definition of peace is that the person who makes peace remains alive after the peace treaty. But not everybody has that definition of peace. For some, peace at all costs, even at death. But peace has arrived. Of course, you're not here to be there. You're not here to celebrate it. But there's peace. I see tonight you have also managed to arouse the passions of those who came to demonstrate. I lecture a lot around the country, around the world, different community centers, universities, as we are here tonight. And they're often protesters, sometimes in much larger numbers. And sometimes they plant themselves in the crowd. And the other day, it was, I think, at Boston University. Someone raised his hand and asked a question. He says, why can't Israel just do the right thing? You know those questions? It's like the guy who comes to temple and says, when are you going to stop beating your wife? I don't beat my wife. Oh, excuses. I said, what's the right thing? Tell me. So the right thing is for Israel to withdraw to the pre-1967 borders, and peace will come. Why can't you just do it? Why is territory holier than life? Why would you rather have war and bloodshed and violence and deprive children of a future when you'll have less territory, but peace and security? How logical. How humane. How sensible. Someone who argues with this seems fanatic. Where a piece of land becomes more valuable than life. And this was his question. Why don't you just withdraw? I said, you're making such a brilliant point. I just have 4 stupid questions. Answer them. Question number 1, I asked him. Tell me, which year was the PLO founded? PLO was, of course, Yasser Arafat's organization, Palestinian Liberation Organization, or I would say Pathological Liars Organization, which was converted into the Palestinian Authority, the PA. Which year was it founded? And what was its objective? Its charter called for the demise, the destruction of the state of Israel. He says, I guess it was founded after you occupied their territories, and therefore they want to destroy you. I said, the PLO was founded in 1964. Israel was at its pre-1967 borders. Gaza belonged to Egypt. The West Bank belonged to Jordan. East Jerusalem was under Jordan. The Golan Heights was under Syria. There was not one settlement. There was not one Jewish settler and not one Jewish settlement. Not on the West Bank, not in Gaza, not in East Jerusalem, not in the Golan Heights. Why would the PLO in 1964 call for the destruction of Israel? By the way, that charter has not been changed till today. Why? Explain this to me. If Israel withdraws to its pre-1967 borders, as it was before 1967, the PLO still says destroy them. What should Israel do then? Question number 1. Question number 2, I asked him, why did Israel occupy these territories in 1967? Was it that Prime Minister Levi Eshkol woke up one morning, called in Moshe Dayan, the defense minister, and says, I'm really bored today. Why don't we go occupy the Golan, East Jerusalem, Jordan, the West Bank? Why not? Let's build another few falafel shops. Let the Jews eat. That's not exactly what happened. What happened was, in the spring of 67, 6 Arab countries, Egypt, Syria, Jordan, Iraq, Lebanon, with the aid of Saudi Arabia, vowed to destroy Israel, to create another Holocaust. In Nasser's words, to throw the 3 million Jews living in Palestine into the sea, and to cleanse the Middle East finally from every last Judah, from every last Jew. Israel preempted the war and fought back and conquered the territories from which the war to destroy Israel was being launched. So you say Israel is an occupier. Why did Israel occupy these territories? because 6 countries wanted to destroy Israel. Israel defended itself and then occupied the territories from which it was attacked. So whose fault is it that Israel occupied these territories exactly? And why did they want to destroy Israel before Israel occupied any of these territories? And why would then a sane person think that if Israel goes back to 67, peace will come, when in 67, that was not a reason for peace. On the contrary, there was the strategy to destroy all of Israel. Question number 3. In the year 2000, Ehud Barak, the Prime Minister of Israel, is sitting with Bill Clinton and Yasser Arafat at Camp David. Barak offers Mr. Arafat 100% of Gaza, 98% of the West Bank, a Palestinian state with a capital in East Jerusalem. Arafat responds by launching the most bloody intifada in Israeli history, which caused the foundation of Zaka, which you just observed, the horrific footage of Zaka work. Suicide bombers saturating the land, murdering and maiming hundreds and hundreds of Jews and Arabs. But why? With such a gracious offer. Question number 4. Arik Sharon, the right-wing politician, the right-wing leader of Israel, in summer of 2005, in August, turned Gaza into a territory that became Judenrein, cleansed of every Jew. Not one Jew was left in Gaza. Dozens of communities were destroyed, 10,000 Jews were expelled, and every last Israeli soldier left Gaza. Sharon, the prime minister at the time, today he lies in a coma. Unfortunately, for quite a few years, said, we were choking them. We have to give them an opportunity to feel independence. Here's a great experiment. Gaza is yours. Not one Jew. Just as it was before 1967, when it was under Egypt. Here is Gaza. Here's the beginning of your state. Israel expected the day after the Arabs would come in, would celebrate the gift, and would begin building a new life for themselves. The day Israel left, a few hours later, the first thing, all the synagogues were burnt. All the communities were destroyed. All the greenhouses that they could have used for their own economic success and growth were destroyed. And from a flourishing country, it was turned into Hamastan and became the center of unwavering, never-ending terror, with thousands and thousands of rockets being launched against civilians. So I turned to the student in Boston University and I said, explain to me, my dear, if it's the 1967 borders that are at the heart of the dispute, why, when Israel would evacuate Gaza, would that simply be used to terrorize their civilians near the border of Gaza, day in, day out, until they were forced last year to go into Gaza? I said, can you please answer me these questions? And then tell me if it's really rational to believe that if Israel would withdraw to the pre-1967 borders, peace would come, or as Israel would withdraw to the pre-1967 borders, the territories that would be given would be used as the new terror states, from which the tiny little state of Israel, the size of Dallas International Airport, would be destroyed. He said, I have to think about it. He's still thinking. Another person asked a question and said, okay, but why not show goodwill? You have to show goodwill, compromise. I know there may be problems, there may be risks. You have to show goodwill. And I told him that's a very, very cruel suggestion because you don't understand what terror is. Terror is a cancer. You remind me of a cancer patient who comes to the doctor takes an X-ray and says, I feel very, very pained to tell you, you have a tumor. You have a tumor in your stomach. You have a growth in your stomach. So he asks the doctor, what do we do? Doctor says, we got to go to surgery and cut it out. He says, I'm a kind man. I don't like to cut anything out. The doctor says, well, what do you want to do? He tells the doctor, let the tumor be in its place. Don't cut it out. I respect it. I'll cede a little territory to the tumor. Because I want to show goodwill. I want to be a mensch. I want to be nice. You know what the end of the story was, my friend? You know what tumors tend to do? They tend to take over the entire body. And he was buried soon after. Terror is a cancer. Terror is a tumor. When you have terrorists in your midst who are vowing to destroy you, to cede territory, to compromise, to show goodwill, is not an act of compassion. It's an act of cruelty. It will secure the death of the entire organism. The compassionate thing is not to compromise an inch to terror. A cancer must be cut out ruthlessly and brutally so that the healthy body can continue to breathe and live. Because the cancer will destroy the entire body and will, of course, destroy itself and its own family and its own children in the process. It will be remembered in history. When the 20th century, when the 1900s are studied well and objectively, as well as the beginning of the 21st century, historians will be amazed on the fact that an intelligent nation as the Jewish nation, who are considered to be intelligent people in Israel, went along with one of the greatest modern historical catastrophes called the Oslo Peace Accords. Where Yasser Arafat was resurrected politically, the PLO was given ammunition by Israel itself, autonomy in the West Bank. And what happened? The autonomy was used to create the most powerful terror infrastructure in modern history, where suicide bombers were sent on buses and in pizzerias, in cafes and in schools and in synagogues and in basketball courts, blowing up children, men, women, mothers and fathers with guts of little children on the streets. This is called Oslo Peace Accords. You want a Palestinian state? Great, but I ask one question, and no one asks this question. Why does, not Mrs. Clinton, not Mr. Obama, not all of the thinkers and think tanks and journalists and politicians and essayists and lecturers ask one thing? When will you change the educational curriculum in your schools? Children are being taught and educated day in, day out that the Jews are the devil. They are the embodiment of evil. Their presence in Israel or as they call it Palestine, is an insult to Allah and to his Prophet Muhammad. That the calling of God is to cleanse the entire land from every single living Jew. That is mainstream curriculum. This is preached in the mosques by the imams every Friday, every day. And in most schools, even in the moderate, so-called moderate West Bank. As long as children are being educated, day in, day out, that Israel is the devil, giving these people a state will not bring peace, not for the Arabs and not for the Jews. It will be bad for the Arabs. Because it will be used as a launching base for endless terror attacks against the tiny state of Israel, which will only hurt the Arabs and cause more bloodshed among the Arabs. If you care about the Arabs, you should oppose a Palestinian state today. Until a culture is not changed, until a world perspective is not transformed, until people are not re-educated to respect life, who are we mocking? Freezing 1,000 units in East Jerusalem so that Jews can't live in their capital? That is the obstacle for peace. And the Jews fall for it. Yeah, we have to hold construction. It's the 1,000 homes that have been the obstacle for peace. You know, if you want peace, Israel will give you peace in 6 hours. There'll be peace. They once asked Golda Meir, when will there be peace? And he said, when the Arabs start loving their own children more than they hate ours. Yeah. Golda Meir said, I commanded my chief of staff that if a soldier or a civilian is killed any time of the night or the day, I want to be woken. Even if it's 2 a.m, you phone me. And she said, when Sadat will make the same request, to wake him up in the middle of the night, then there'll be better times. Until the culture is not changed, then the attempts for peace are a cynical, superficial, skin-deep show. And anyone who cares about life should not become intoxicated by a vision that will simply create bloodshed and violence and strife and war. And it's not fair for the Arab children as much as it's not fair for Jewish children. But no one speaks this language, changing the curriculum, changing the education. That's the key issue. That is the obstacle for peace. People talk about 2 equal sides. Israel doesn't want to go to the negotiation tables. The Arabs don't want to go to the negotiation tables. Today's New York Times is a story how Mrs. Clinton and Egypt are pushing very hard, both the Israelis and the Arabs, to sit down. There are 2 equal sides. My friends, it sounds sophisticated, but it's a lie. It's a lie. I ask you a real question. Answer me scientifically and objectively without emotion. If Syria would send all of its troops on vacation to Hawaii for 6 months' time, do you think Israel would go and occupy Syria? If Jordan and Egypt would put down their arms and send their troops on vacation skiing in Vermont for a week, do you think Israel would go and conquer Jordan and Egypt? You know the answer. But what if the Israeli army goes on vacation for 24 hours? What do you think will be the fate of Israel, and does anybody doubt it? There would be no Israel. That's called 2 sides. All Israel wants is, let us live in peace. You're ready? We're ready in an hour. Over the last 60 years since the creation of the State of Israel in 1948, I want you to know, Jews are not perfect. We have our villains, we have our terrorists too. But on your finger, how many Jewish suicide bombers can you count? How many Arab buses have been exploded by Jewish terrorists? How many Arab pizza shops have been blown to pieces by Jews? How many Ramadan gatherings have been bombed by Jews? Religious schools, mosques. How many Arabs were lynched, thrown out of windows by Jews? How many Jews have you heard accusing Muslims of using Christian and Jewish blood in their pitas, as the Arabs still accuse the Jews of doing? How many? Jews are not a perfect people. Some Jews say stupid things. Some of them even do stupid things. I know I'm Jewish. I know my brothers. But I know that 99.9% of Israeli society wants peace. That's what we breathe, that's what we pray for, that's what we teach our children from the milk of their mother. They nurse the words of Oseh Shalom Bimromav Uyaseh Shalom Aleinu V'al Kol Yisrael. You want peace? In 6 hours there can be peace. If you want peace. But there's another culture in which the infants who are nursing the milk of their mother, in that milk, they are receiving the message that the greatest calling of our time is to exterminate every Jewish man, woman, and child living in Israel. Hundreds of thousands and millions of children are raised with that education. In mosques and in schools, the maps that they study don't recognize Israel. There is no calling for a Palestinian state as the 22nd Arab state in the Middle East to live on the side of Israel. The ambition is to create a Palestinian state instead of Israel. The next question. Rabbi Jacobson, how do you justify theft? Granted, you can't cede territory. Granted, ceding territory will only invite more terror. Granted, when you give in to cancer, it will take you over. Granted, when people want to kill you, to compromise will simply intoxicate them. But how do you justify theft? You're stealing another people's land. 1937, I don't know if you heard of this, there was the Peel Commission. Lord Peel was Lord of England, and Palestine was under the British mandate, and they organized then what's known as Lord Peel's Commission to discuss the future of the Israeli-Arab conflict, and maybe you can divide the land. And the head of the Jewish agency was then David Ben-Gurion, who later would become the first prime minister of Israel in 1948. And when Ben-Gurion was standing, when it was his turn and he took the oath, and he was testifying for 3 hours about the Jewish rights to Palestine. And finally, Lord Peel turned to him and he said, Mr. Ben-Gurion, in which city were you born? And Ben-Gurion said, I was born in Polonsk. Which country is that? And he said, it's in Poland. There was an eerie silence in the room. Lord Peel said, isn't it fascinating? Every Arab who came here to testify, when I asked them where they were born, they said they were born here. Every Jew who came here to testify, when I asked them where they were born, most of them were born in Eastern Europe. Do you have a deed that connects you to this country? When I asked them for a deed, they take out the Kushan, which was the Ottoman Turkish deed for land ownership. What is your Kushan, Mr. Ben-Gurion? You weren't born here. Your colleagues weren't born here. You're from Poland. It was quiet in the room. David Ben Gurion realized that he was holding a Bible upon which he took oath when he began to testify 3 hours ago. He lifted up the Bible. He lifted up the Torah. And he said, "Here is our Kushan. I believe in Britain. They respect this book too. I believe billions of Muslims and Christians respect this book. Hundreds of times in this book does it say that the creator of the world gave one little piece of land, not a big piece of land, one little piece of land to one people. Here is my Kushan." This occupation myth really disturbs the argument and actually doesn't allow the Arabs to develop and embrace peace. When I was in South Africa a while ago, so it's popular by some journalists and activists to compare Israel to South Africa, the apartheid country. So I was interviewed on one of the radio shows. I told the radio host, I said, I believe that what Israel is doing to the Arabs is really wrong. He got very excited. He said, I like when a rabbi stands up to the truth. Tell us about it. I said, it's very simple. I believe, as I'm sure you believe, a person cannot find blessing and success when they're living on stolen land. By Israel allowing the Arabs to seize stolen land and claim it as their own, Israel is depriving the Arabs from the divine blessings they deserve. It's not good for them. Why are people embarrassed to say the truth? Israel is not stolen. It's not occupied. It's equally absurd to say Israel is occupied as it is to say that New Jersey is occupied by the Americans. In fact, it's more absurd. You can argue that America is occupied by the Americans, and I won't get into it at the moment. If there was ever a nation that has a right to a country, it's the Jewish people to the land of Israel, because the creator of the entire universe allocated that piece of land to one nation. If there was ever a nation that owns land, it's Israel. So people say, what is Israel supposed to do? I say, I'm not sure, but I know what they're not supposed to do. What they're not supposed to do is give the impression to their enemies that they will be successful in destroying them. And every time Israel gives up a piece of territory, they intoxicate those who are addicted to terror and create within them the feeling that they will be successful. Because through terror, they seized this part of Israel and this part of Israel. If they only continue, they will get all of it. I want to ask you a question. If Israel withdraws from the entire country and remains only in Dizengoff Street in Tel Aviv to eat in some cafes, and the rest is given away, what do you think will happen the next day? The cafes will be bombed. The objective is not two states near each other. Halavai, as they say by us. It would have been very nice. It would have been very sweet. You see, there's another important point. We Westerners think like Westerners, and we don't respect the Arabs enough. I always tell my liberal friends, you're so liberal, but you lack respect. I believe Arabs. You don't. When they say we want Israel destroyed, I believe them. You say they don't mean it, they don't want it, they need therapy, anger management, send them roses, we'll do some yoga. We'll do some transcendental meditation. We'll listen to the Beatles. We'll go eat a little sushi. No. This is the Middle East. You know the story? The scorpion. You ever met a scorpion? The scorpion is near the ocean. And it wants to pass, but the scorpion can't swim. The scorpion got to get to the other side. Scorpion sees a beautiful little duck. Scorpion says, my little duck, you know how to swim. Can I sit on your back and pass the river with you? Duck says, no way. Scorpion says, why? He says, you're going to bite me. You'll kill me. He said, I would never do that. He says, of course you will. You do that. Everybody. He says, no, but if I bite you and you die, what happens? I drown. Right? So I'm going to kill myself in the process. Duck says, logic. Duck says, fine. Scorpion gets on the duck. Duck starts swimming. Halfway in the middle of the river, the scorpion bites the duck. Duck starts bleeding to death. Turns up to the scorpion. Says, I don't understand. I'm going down. You're going down. Why would you do this to yourself? Besides, you made a deal. There's two versions to the answer. Basically, two different Jews overheard the conversation, and each one heard a different version. Which is what usually happens. If it's two versions, we're happy. Usually 19 versions. Version number one is the scorpion turned to the duck and said, because at the end of the day, I'm a scorpion. I can't help myself. There's a second version to the answer. Because this is the Middle East. We like to phrase and classify Middle Eastern politics in Western terms. In Western values and ethics, if you and I are having a dispute over a home, and the home is worth $500,000, and we cannot stop fighting, and at one point I turn to you and I say, you know what? Let's just split the pie into two. You get $250,000, I get $250,000, and let's call it quits. Often your attitude will be, you know, that's a good idea. He's a mensch. I'm a mensch. We can't get this together. Let's compromise, split up the birthday cake. You get half, I get half, we live in peace. We Westerners think that's how it works in the Middle East. Israel and the Arabs are fighting over land. Go to the Arabs and say, let's split the birthday cake for heaven's sake. Take a Palestinian state, give us a state of Israel, and peace will be. Logical. Western logic. It's not Middle East logic. Middle East logic is different. And here I come to the book of Genesis. Sarah is married to Abraham. Abraham marries Hagar, has a boy, Ishmael. Sarah gives birth to Isaac. Ishmael and Isaac are growing up. Sarah sees that their coexistence is not doing very well. So what does Sarah say? Sarah tells Abraham, I can't have Ishmael in the home. He has to be out of this home. Why? Ki lo yirash ben ha'amim b'niyim Yitzchak. Because the son of the maid cannot inherit your estate together with Isaac. Okay. I understand Sarah is a Jewish possessive mother. No problem. She wants her little baby to have it all. Fine. Not the first Jewish mother to do that. Not the last Jewish mother to do it. It's a fact. The Italian mother and the Jewish mother both make pasta for dinner. Both of their teenagers come home from school. Both teenagers say, the pasta stinks, I'm not going to eat it on my dead body. Both mothers shoot when they hear that. The difference is whom? The Italian mother shoots her son. The Jewish mother shoots herself. I understand. Sarah's overprotective, my son, my baby, fine. Abraham disagrees with Sarah. Abraham doesn't want to send Ishmael away. I have 2 children. Let them split the cake. But now God comes into the picture. And I would expect the God of morality, who's not afraid to disagree with Jewish women, or with anybody. He disagreed with Eve. Okay, she wasn't a Jewish woman, but she was powerful. I would expect God to tell Sarah, Sarah, relax. Morality, justice. But God sides with Sarah. What does he tell Abraham? He gives Abraham the eternal commandment. Whatever Sarah tells you, you listen to her. And that has become the eternal, timeless commandment to every husband in history. And you can quote me on that. God didn't say what Sarah tells you about Ishmael. Whatever Sarah tells you, you must listen to her. Why? Why does he side with Sarah? My friends, my dear friends, this happened 3,700 years ago. But those words of Sarah, God sided with her because they tell the story of history. And if we ever doubt it, just read the news today. Sarah was not saying, Ishmael doesn't have the right to inherit your estate with my son. He does have the right. He's your son, just as Isaac is your son. He's your child. He deserves to get a part of your estate. If you read it clearly in Hebrew, what Sarah is saying is, Ishmael can't inherit your estate together with your son. Because Yadai Bakail V'Yad Kol Boy. Because if you give him part of the estate, the way he understands it, that the reason you're giving him part of the estate is because you're weak. And you know that really he deserves it all. And hence it's an invitation to continue to fight until he gets it all. It's a different mentality. In Vermont, the mentality is, you're so nice, you compromised. You gave me half of the cake. In Gaza, the mentality is, you gave me half of the cake. Because you know you're wrong. And you know really I deserve the whole cake, as I've always been screaming. And you showed weakness. And my pressure helped that you ceded half. And if I continue my terror campaign, I will get it all. Sarah doesn't say he should not. He cannot. He doesn't have the mentality. He doesn't think in such terms. I can paint romantic pictures. But peace is about reality. It's about children deserving to walk to school in safety and not being blown up to pieces on an egged bus. You know about the preacher who loved children. He loved children. And one day he paved his alleyway with a new pavement of cement. And of course the children saw fresh cement, and what do children do? They love leaving their imprint everywhere, and they start jumping on the new cement, and the preacher comes out and starts hollering at the children, "You lazy brats, self-centered, narcissistic, good-for-nothings." And his wife comes out and says, "Whoa, whoa, whoa. You always say that you love children. Why are you hollering at them?" And he says, "My dear wife, I love children in the abstract, not in the concrete." They're all screaming, "Peace, peace." I don't want peace in the abstract. I want peace in the concrete.
Yeah.
It's beautiful to talk about peace, but peace must equal security, safety, life, not living in perpetual fear, not parents burying their children every year, and not, as he described, a member of Zaka coming to see his own wife slain, shot from close range a few months ago. It's not called peace. They call them victims of peace. I want to know, why is death defined as part of peace? If that's the type of peace, we don't want that peace. Sarah makes a very profound observation. He doesn't know how to. In Ishmael's world, he needs all of Israel. The Palestinian state must substitute Israel. If Israel then gives Ishmael a peace, Ishmael says, "I got a little bit, I'll continue my terror campaign and I'll get more." Am I speaking in the abstract? Go to Gaza in 2005. Israel gave up a piece of the cake impeccably, flawlessly. Not one Jew was left. Here it is. What was the response? We got Gaza. Let's now move on. In pieces, we'll get the rest of it. What can Israel do to make peace? Israel can do nothing to make peace. The Arabs are the ones who have to decide they want peace. What Israel can do is not to intoxicate the situation, and not to distance them from peace, and not to give them the illusion that through terror they will win the land. Because when Israel does that, it indirectly assists them in removing themselves from the day when they will sober up and mature and be ready to inculcate into their children a new perspective, a perspective based on respect, on mutual respect, on the dignity of life. Many of you Christians will not understand this, but my fellow Jews sitting here will understand it very well. It has to do with the very deep complexes that the Jewish people have. And that is, and I'm going to use a observation made by the first chief rabbi of Israel. His name was, anybody heard of him? His name was Rabbi Cook, Rabbi Abraham Cook. He was the first chief rabbi of Palestine before the state in the 1930s. He died in 1935. He was a prolific writer. He was a poet. He once asked a question: why is the world obsessed with the Jews? Why do Jews always play big league? Why do they never play little league? They never constitute more than 1% of civilization. Why do they make so much noise? I mean, it's a fascinating thing. How many people live in Indonesia? 300 million people. How often do you read about Indonesia? Once in 7.5 years. How many people live in Israel? 7 million. How often do you read about Israel? Every single day on the newspapers, blogs, websites. It's always been this way. The world is obsessed with the Jews and with Israel. And he asked why. And he said that history is like a dinner. You ever went to a banquet, a dinner? People give speeches. I don't know how it is by the Christians. I know how it is by the Jews. One speech after another speech after another speech. You finish your speech, hopefully. You put down the mic. Next speaker, next speaker, next speaker. History progresses. Culture, civilizations, nations, peoples. The Egyptians, the Assyrians, the Babylonians, the Persians, the Greeks, the Romans, the Byzantines. In Hegel's thought, right? You have the thesis, you have the antithesis. A nation, a culture grows, continues to grow, reaches its plateau, its height, its pinnacle, then begins to decline. And history moves on, and every culture makes its imprint on history, its contribution, productive or constructive or destructive, and then it moves on. He says the only nation that's still holding the mic are the Jews. Everybody had the mic. The Romans had the mic for 500 years, but then they let go of the mic. He says the Jews are still holding the mic. Why? And everyone still wants to know what they have to say. And he answered, because the Jews are stuttering. So for thousands of years, the world turns to them and says, Nu Bege. At Sinai, they heard a very powerful message. It's so powerful and so intense, it scares them. And they're afraid to say it. Because they're not sure how the world will accept it. It's very hard for the Jews to embrace their destiny in this world. The only nation that claims that Israel is an ordinary country is Israel. Do you know that? No one else thinks Israel is normal. No one else thinks Israel is ordinary. The Jews are walking around and screaming, we're just a regular nation. No, you're not! And you're not going to deceive anybody. Stop stuttering. Tell the world the truth. And that's our calling today. That's our calling. The world wants to hear the truth. They don't want to hear stutterers. But when was the last time you heard a Jewish leader or a Jewish journalist get up and say, Israel didn't occupy any territory, God gave it to the Jews? Jews are afraid to say it because it's too Jewish. It sounds evangelical. And which Columbia, Harvard graduate Jew would want to sound like an evangelical Christian, for heaven's sake? We quote Darwin, we don't quote Moses. We quote Freud, we won't quote Rabbi Akiva. We quote Hitchens, we won't quote the Baal Shem Tov. Too Jewish. Groucho Marx said, I would never belong to a club that would have me as a member. So tonight I turn to you, my fellow Jews. You know what a guy is? A guy is a Gentile, and a Jew is a Jew. Goyim are Gentiles. There was once a Jew who converted to Christianity and he became a priest. So at his first sermon, everybody came to listen to him, even the cardinals. And when he finished, one of the cardinals went over to him and said, that was a beautiful sermon you gave, but next time don't start it off, my fellow Goyim. So I speak to two communities today who build bridges with each other. First, I reach out to you, my fellow Jews. And then I reach out to you, my fellow Goyim. I didn't convert. My fellow Jews, we have to stop stuttering. We ought to stop stuttering. We ought to cherish our heritage, our history, our faith. Because if the non-Jewish world will ever come to respect the Jewish people, it will be Jews who respect themselves. If the world will ever come to embrace the Jewish vision of history, it will be Jews who are not embarrassed with themselves. They will never love us as long as we hate ourselves. Am I right? And they're not even Jewish, you see? Non-Jews respect Jews who respect themselves. And they're embarrassed by Jews who are embarrassed by themselves. This is not about racism or bigotry. On the contrary, it's about an obsession with the value of life and the value of peace and the respect for every person. We as Jews ought to intensify and strengthen our Jewish education, our wisdom, our knowledge of our heritage, of our history, of our faith. We have to inspire ourselves to give our children the gifts of Torah, the gifts of Judaism, so that when they understand Israel, when they look at Israel, they don't see it as just some foreign tumor in the Middle East that's making trouble and perturbing Mr. Obama's plan to create a peaceful world. Don't laugh. But rather, they can appreciate Israel from a Jewish perspective, from a sober historical perspective, from a broad perspective. Give your children the gift of Torah. To my dear fellow Goyim, we're all God's children. On behalf of my people, I want to thank you. Express our profound gratitude for your unwavering love and support and commitment to a world cleansed of hate, of bigotry, of racism, of anti-Semitism. And your commitment to defend good and innocent people. We truly thank you tonight. We salute you tonight. We honor you tonight for your tremendous affection and display of camaraderie with a country that is undeserving of all the hateful rhetoric it receives every day on campuses and universities, in newspapers and websites around the country. I admire your understanding of Jewish history, because in one word, if you want to understand Jewish history, the Jews are the miners' canaries of history. We were all taken a few weeks ago with the story of the miners in Chile. We know before miners go down to their mines, they first send canary birds, known as miners' canaries. What is the function of the canary birds? The canary birds go down into the mines. If they come back, we know it's safe to go down into the mines. If the canary birds die or come back diseased, we know that there are noxious fumes in the mines, and therefore humans should not go down because they may become ill or die from the poisonous, noxious fumes in the mines. Who are the miners' canaries of history? The Jews. For this is the truth of history. Wherever and whenever there was a people or a nation or a country or a king or a government that was targeting Jews and persecuting Jews, Jews were always the first, but never the last. The Jews are the first one who die and suffer from the noxious fumes in our world. Suicide bombers didn't begin by exploding, by blowing up the World Trade Center on 9/11. They didn't begin in London and in Madrid and in India and in Yemen and in Russia. They began in Israel. Hitler began with the Jews, but it would have never ended with the Jews. Every American was destined to die. The Muslim terrorists begin with the Jews, but it never ends. And when people isolate Israel and say it's Israel's problem, no. Israel is the miners' canaries. The canaries are sensitive to the fumes and they get hit first. But the poison will remain and will kill every living person. That's the nature of all history. You study any nation that persecuted Jews, they began with the Jews, but ultimately it went beyond the Jews. Jews are the people that attract the hate of the most evil elements of society. That's the truth of history. The Turkomadays of the world, the Khmelnytskys of the world, the Stalins and the Goebbels and the Mengeles and the Hitlers and the Pol Pots and the Arafats and the Nasrallas and the Ahmadinejads of the world are first and foremost attracted to exterminate the Jewish people. We are the canaries. Why? You'll figure that out. Read the Bible. And I salute you for appreciating that, for internalizing that message. Together, we must hold hands and say no to lies, no to bloodshed, no to violence, and equally no to fake peace, which will only bring more death. Tonight we must say yes to life, yes to justice, yes to morality, and yes to the truth that the land of Israel is God's eternal gift to his people. Thank you very much.
Very special thank you to Rabbi Jacobson. Now I'll close with a small prayer. We thank the Almighty for this evening and ask blessings on all who came. We ask for an increased awareness of the people and land of Israel, and the instilling of love for your word concerning your land. I ask that all here have a safe trip home, till once again we meet as Jews and Christians in mutual support of the land of Israel. And everyone said, Amen. Am Yisrael Ka.